Hello there, and welcome to yet another episode of the FIRE podcast. The whole concept of FIRE is quite appealing. When I started on the journey to financial independence, all I could think of was a feeling of freedom from being dependent on my job for my paycheck. Now, due to a variety of family circumstances, I've had debt from my first paycheck. It was either a personal loan, a student loan, a mortgage, credit card debt, and very often a combination of all of these. Though I knew I wanted to retire early from the beginning, it took me a bit of time to actually start to do the math on what that would actually look like and how much I needed to have in my savings and investments to actually call it quits. It was even later that I realized that there were so many different ways to achieve FIRE. Now I'm still on my journey, earning, saving, and investing each day. As you know, at FIRE, we're focused on financial independence and not necessarily on retire early. But as I contemplate achieving financial independence, I look at it as a gradual set of steps that keep giving me the time to pursue more in life while I have the energy to do it. So today, let's dive in and discuss these various forms of FIRE. Now, at the heart of the FIRE philosophy is the 4% rule from the Trinity study. The thesis is that if you have 25 times your annual expenses saved in an 80-20 mix of stocks and bonds, then you should be able to live for at least 30 years by withdrawing 4% and not run out of money. Obviously, there's a lot of debate in the FIRE community on the actual withdrawal percentages. Obviously, the lower the percentage, the longer the money lasts. Now, we're not going to go debate all of that over here, but let's focus on the idea or the principle that if you save some large multiple of expenses and withdraw a small percentage, you should be able to live for a long time. Now, the question is, how much is that amount? Because if you're thinking of what I was thinking when we first heard of this concept, then you're probably fixated just as I was on how large that number is. Now, various members of the FIRE community have approached this number in unique ways, and that has resulted in some generally accepted forms of financial independence and retire early. Now, the first form of this FIRE approach is called lean FIRE. Honestly, I'm not a big fan of this approach because the idea is to reduce your expenses post-retirement and make it work with an obscenely small amount of money. I have read stories of folks who have retired with about $300,000 in their account. And I honestly think the community has taken this too far because the whole point of FIRE is to live fulfilled lives. And by trying to constrain yourself, you're creating highly miserly lives with constraints on everything. Now, for those who can make it work, great, more power to them. But personally, as I said, life should be lived with minimal constraints. So I'm not a big fan of this approach, but hey, who am I to judge? To each his own, right? Now, the complete opposite end of the spectrum from lean FIRE is fat FIRE. The idea here is to live life with comfort. Now, to do this, you need a large number in terms of your FIRE number, the amount of money that you need to FIRE. And this can be quite daunting for those who pursue it. But I've also heard some pretty cool stories of folks who have worked in the tech sector, like in the FANG companies, making a killing with their stock options and then calling it quits. Now, there are also folks who have saved diligently over a long period of time and then retired with their 5 to 10 million. Again, there are so many ways to get there, but the point at the end of the day is that you can work towards fat FIRE with a large number in mind and find ways to do it. So that brings us to kind of the third form of FIRE, which is called coast FIRE. And it's a totally different form. This is really where you aggressively build a portfolio to a point where the math tells you that you will get to your FIRE target at some point in time in the future. Basically, the idea is that you let compounding do its thing and coast away until you reach your magic date. I actually like this idea a lot, and I use it as part of my FIRE strategy. For example, I have a college fund for my child where I have aggressively put in enough and almost am to the point where I can just let it compound and not have to worry about my child's schooling needs. For some golden lives, the coast FIRE mentality is actually excellent. So that kind of rounds up, some of the approaches that are not my top favorites, but let's get into two of my personal favorites in the FIRE philosophy. The first favorite that I have is what's called Barista FIRE. The philosophy behind Barista FIRE is that you find a part-time job instead of your full-time job and hence get out of the race faster. I'm personally a big fan of this approach for a variety of reasons. Now, we spend a lot of time in our careers building career capital, and, we need to make sure that we monetize that capital to its fullest, right? We often don't need to retire completely and be out of a job. For most, we actually want to have something to do. A part-time job allows one to be active, continue to earn some money, putting that career capital to use, and be relevant in the marketplace, right? Now, things never go to plan, and the idea of continuing to have some form of work experience, just in case you want to jump back to a full-time role, can actually give a lot of peace of mind. And I think that's the whole part of financial independence, right? Which is you want to have the peace of mind to live your life to the fullest. You would also do this as a coast-fire approach, right? Earning well and saving the corpus needed to make compounding work. Then you do a Barista FIRE to find a part-time job and give you enough for your day-to-day expenses until your FIRE portfolio does its job, right? So again, going back, the idea is that you find your corpus that you need to make compounding work. You allow the compounding to work, but then what you do is you just find a part-time job to give you enough for your day-to-day expenses. So I think it's a cool way to approach it, just because you're mixing and matching different approaches, and you're actually allowing yourself to enjoy life a lot more, right? The other big consideration in kind of doing the Barista FIRE is that, many folks don't take into account things like health insurance, which is super critical for life. And honestly, the best way to get access to some of these benefits is holding on to that part-time job, because then you get your health insurance, you get your benefits like your 401k. There are companies that offer a host of benefits these days, like commuter benefits and so on and so forth, which you can make use of, by kind of like mixing and matching the approach. So that's why I love Barista FIRE. It's kind of like you have your feet in two boats at the same time, right? Now, the last kind of financial independent approach is honestly my biggest favorite. I'm kind of say the best for the last, and this is what's called cash flow FI. Now, this is where you intentionally create multiple sources of income, preferably passive, and over time build enough streams of income to replace your primary job. Now, I personally love this because there's so many different facets of cash flow FI that make it so appealing. First one, of course, that you're creating multiple sources of income. So irrespective of how the markets go or how circumstances in life might change, you have a diversified income portfolio. And, no matter what happens, you have different forms of income that you're dependent on. The second part about it is that because you're developing income streams that are essentially replacing your primary income, you get to set a target metric. For example, percentage of your primary income covered by your streams of alternative incomes, right? Now, I'm very much a goal-based guy. I love having a quantitative goal to go after. So your passive income could be, for example, like dividends or rental income. And, you could definitely use these metrics to kind of look at how much is your dividend portfolio, your rental portfolio covering your primary income, and that allows you to really understand how far or how close you are to your financial independence date. But I also think that there are, diversified income also allows you to go after some passion projects. It could be writing a book or starting a YouTube channel or heck, a podcast, right? And I think that's why cash flow FI is the king of FIRE approaches, right? It brings together best of all the above approaches without asking you to sacrifice too much while giving you a tremendous amount of clarity. Now, it takes a while to get to the goal with cash flow FI, but, in my view, it's the journey that's important, right? It's not the end. The journey is where you tend to have the most amount of fun. So that was quite a bit. I think that it's just for those who are in the beginning of their FIRE journey, it's really important to know that you have options out there, right? So let's just quickly recap what we talked about. We have multiple forms of FIRE, right? We have, lean FIRE. It's for those minimalists who can take down their expenses to ridiculous levels and achieve FIRE with a very small corpus. And you have fat FIRE. These are for folks who are willing to save for a long term and target a high enough amount that they can retire with a good enough corpus to support their current or desired lifestyles. You have coast FIRE, where you work to save the corpus required to let compounding do its thing and deliver you to your FIRE target at some target date in the future. Of course, Barista FIRE, one of my favorites, where you can find a part-time job. Once you reach a certain amount of savings and use that to meet your living expenses while you allow compounding to do its thing. And then, of course, the king of all fires, cash flow FIRE, where you find multiple streams of income, likely passive or preferably passive, actually, to replace your primary income. Well, that was quite a bit. Those, again, hopefully that was enlightening to all of you who were listening, especially for those who are just getting introduced to the concept of FIRE. So as you think about all of those concepts, what do you think is a good fit for you? That's really where you want to start, your FIRE journey at, is really trying to understand how you want to organize your FIRE journey. Would you Barista FIRE, where, get a good enough number, find a part-time job, and then, coast till you reach your FIRE number? Or just say, listen, I'm just going to grind it out completely because I want a big fat corpus to go the fat FIRE route, right? So think about it. Thanks again for listening to this episode. We have a ton of fun topics coming up, including how to set up your financial independence portfolio. How do you think about, your financial independence goals? And of course, how do you maintain focus in this long journey towards financial independence? So there's a lot more to come. Until then, let's continue to put our heads down and work towards financial independence. Cheers, guys.